What the media is not reporting today will fill volumes of history books in the future. People for generations will study how this was done, how America and the world was fundamentally transformed. And I promise you that in those history books, scholars years down the road will say, how did it happen? And no one saw it coming. Well, it's easy. It's easy to explain. Two things. One, we have a complicit media. Two, we haven't taught ourselves or our children history in a very, very long time. And three, it's easier to not pay attention. Tonight, history. And one for the history books. This will go down as the most corrupt administration of all time in America. But there's a caveat to that. Somebody has to be looking for it. There has to be something left at the end of it. History is being made right now. Tonight, somebody's got to set the record straight because nobody is doing it. So we will. I said this in January last year. Radicals, communists, socialists, revolutionaries, and Islamists will work together to destroy capitalism and the Western way of life. Roundly ridiculed from the left and the right. Tonight, I want to have you ask two questions. What part of this statement now is not clear? What part of it? The radicals and communists or socialists or revolutionaries or Islamists are now kind of working together to destroy capitalism and the Western way of life. I mean, it's probably the Islamist thing, except we'll show you later on tonight that in Iran, what a weird thing. They held an anti-Wall Street rally in support of Occupy Wall Street this weekend in Tehran. Uh-oh. Huh. Radicals, communists, socialists, revolutionists, Islamists will work together to destroy capitalism and the Western way of life. Question number one at the end of this program, what part of this is not clear to your friends now? Question number two, what else explains these facts? Because, see, I was called a conspiracy theorist, and I don't really care. I don't really care. But I have this theory now, that if you can explain the facts any other way, it takes a grand conspiracy theorist to be able to do it. There is no other explanation than this. None. If you can come up with it, I'm begging you, tell it to me. Give it to me. But please do it with the facts. Tonight, we're going in a different direction. Tonight, I am no longer the conspiracy theorist. I'm looking for another theory. You will be the conspiracy theorist, or your friends will, if they can't explain these facts. Tonight, you're going to hear their words, not mine. Very little opinion tonight. These are the facts. Tonight, I'm doing this show because I have had congressmen, I have had presidential candidates, I have had prime ministers, thank God not the prime minister of Israel, but I met with a prime minister from Europe, and he asked me a question of, can you explain, I'm like, you know who I'm a rodeo clown, man. Really? You're a prime minister. I've had foreign dignitaries from all over the world. I have had spiritual leaders, major spiritual leaders, come to me in the last 2 to 4 weeks and ask me, Glenn, can you explain all of this? I swear to you, I'm on my phone at my house saying, you got to be kidding me. Really? Yes. Yes, I can. But I am not going to waste my time explaining it over and over again and give it to the elites when I can give it to them and you at the same time. I'll give it to you tonight, and I'm going to spend the time, and then we're moving on, because time is running out. You have to move forward. The time to warn, I believe, is over. The time to prepare to be a help to others because of what people are doing to our society and to our economy is now. You've got to prepare, because Things are changing on a global scale. You've got to be a part of the positive. Tonight, let's go with this. Things that I charge. Why don't you open this all the way up? What I charge, and then can I back it up? And this is scratching the surface. I charge. This is not organized by students. Or unions are deeply involved in its planning. 1960s radicals and revolutionaries are leading the way. They have led the way for a while. There is a significant anti-Jew movement underfoot here. They are trying to collapse, they'll call it transform many times, but they're trying to collapse capitalism and the Western way of life. Big, organized money is involved. George Soros is clearly involved. Those around the president are involved, and he knows. Tides is helping fund this. Center for American Progress is involved. And the media knows and supports the destruction of capitalism. There's more to this board. I hope to be able to get to it tonight. So let's get into it. Let's go through these, and I'm just going to... Can I produce the video? Not my opinion. Can I produce video to back these charges up? The left has fallen in love with the Occupy Wall Street movement. The leftist media, and that's what we have now in this country, politicians, union bosses, community organizers, are all singing the praises of this movement. They love how organic and spontaneous the movement is. The Tea Party was racist, monochromatic, old. Occupy, all-inclusive, diversive, and also youthful. Tea Party, full of vicious, potentially violent haters. Occupy, teeming loving, caring, compassionate, peaceful do-gooders. And where the Tea Party was anti-government, hostage takers. These people want the nation to default on its obligations. It's a danger to our country. Do you remember that? The Occupy Wall Street people, all they want is social and economic justice. One of these pictures isn't right. Tonight, you have to draw your own conclusions. After watching this show, I would love to hear an alternate explanation for what this is, who's behind this movement, what their motives are, and what exactly they're seeking for an outcome. The press isn't going to give it to you. They're not going to. They'll just keep feeding you the lies. And one of the lies is they don't know. Well, really? Because we're a bunch of yahoos that are working on our own dime, and we can figure this out. What's wrong with the giant news organizations of America? Let's start with the usual suspects, shall we? Let's start with Acorn. Former Acorn communications coordinator, Dave Swanson. Dave is going to be seen in this video. Here's number one, organized not by students. Dave laid out a plan on August 28th, 2011. Here he is.
Well, we're planning to model our behavior on the actions that happened earlier this year in Tahrir Square, Cairo, Egypt, in Tunisia, and the actions you see in Spain and Greece and countries around the world when governments get even a fraction as bad as ours has gotten. And so we're going to go to Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C., whose name is quite similar to Tahrir Square, translated, and we're going to occupy it beginning October 6th, and we're going to remain, and we're going to non-violently interfere and shut down the offices of our government.
Communications coordinator for Acorn. Remember, that was in August. Schools, not even, it's organized by students. But it didn't start with Acorn, and it didn't start in August. It actually started last spring. We can say that the first time we saw it, we told you this was coming when we first exposed Stephen Lerner from SEIU. He exposed this plan at a progressive conference in New York City. Our people were there. Now, we showed it to you on March 22nd, 2011. His plan was to get people to stop paying their mortgage and shut down the banks and create a crisis on Wall Street. Now, I'd love to show you the video, but unfortunately, it's been scrubbed from the internet. Isn't that weird? Now, our original copy was over at Fox News. Unfortunately, I don't own any of the material that I ever presented to you on Fox News. It belongs to Fox News. So that video of Stephen Lerner last April planning this is in the Fox News archives. I'm going to play some audio for you in a moment that we broke this morning on my radio program and my website. It is a recording of a speech given over the weekend at Pace University. It was given by a prominent labor leader, and it was given to a very select group of other prominent labor, progressive, and community leaders. I believe what you are about to hear is nothing short of a plan to commit economic terrorism. He was introduced as SEIU when he spoke this weekend at the Left Forum. He was the director of SEIU's banking and finance campaign. Important to remember. He was the person on the Wall Street reform for SEIU. So he would go to the Treasury Department and meet on Wall Street reform. He is also the guy responsible for the video that we showed you here, the protest on the lawns. Do you remember when they started going to people's houses? Remember that? When SEIU rent-a-thug stormed a bank executive's private property and trapped a young child who was home alone. He also spearheaded the Justice for Janitors campaign that have led protests all across the country. In one city, protesters entered the busiest intersections in Houston and handcuffed themselves in a circle to trash cans and dumping trash in intersections in order to disrupt traffic. Here's what he told other labor leaders this weekend. Listen to his plan. Listen carefully. Here's the plan to destroy America.
Unions are almost dead. We cannot survive doing what we do. But the simple fact of the matter is community organizations are almost dead also. And I think if you think about what we need to do, it may give us some direction, which is essentially what the folks that are in charge, you know, the big banks and everything, what they want is stability. There are actually extraordinary things that we could do right now that would start to destabilize the folks that are in power and start to rebuild their movement.
He's now going to outline a plan on how to collapse our government and our nation's financial system.
For example, 10% of homeowners, going back to where you started, who are a quarter of all people who own a home are underwater, right? Their home is worth, they're paying more for it than it's worth. 10% of those people are now in strategic default, meaning they're refusing to pay, but they're staying in their home. That's totally spontaneous, right? They figured out it takes a year to kick me out of my home because more foreclosures backed up. I'm going to stay, I won't pay. It's just what business does. It's a good business decision. If you could double that number, you would make banks, put banks on the edge of insolvency again. What would happen if we could organize homeowners en masse to do a mortgage structure? To say, if we get 500,000 people to agree, we'll agree we won't pay our mortgages. It would literally cause a new financial crisis for the banks, not for us. We would be doing quite well because we wouldn't be paying.
The whole reason we did TARP and the stimulus package and the health care bill was to bring us back from the brink. And here he is, a man who has been to the White House, who is now detailing, we haven't gotten to it yet, a plan to push our financial institutions back to the brink. So every dollar that we have given, every dollar that has been given to the government, every dollar that has been given to banks and institutions through TARP will be wasted. Listen to his strategy now.
The folks that control this country care about one thing: how the stock market does, how the bond market does, and what the bonuses is. So I think we need to have a very simple strategy. How do we bring down the stock market? How do we bring down their bonuses? How do we interfere with their ability to be rich? And if we don't do, and that means you have to politically isolate them, economically isolate them, and disrupt them.
Okay, here he is beginning to conspire to bring down the stock market.
A bunch of us around the country think about who would be a really good company to hate. We decided that would be JP Morgan Chase, based here in New York. so what we're looking at is in the first week of May, can we get enough people together, we're starting now, to really have a week of action in New York with the goal of voting? I don't want to give any details because I don't know which police agents are in the room, but the goal would be that we would roll out in New York the first week in May.